Hey there, this is Lettie. I'm back today in talking about planning your wedding or planning your event. My first segment and first podcast I started out with, we talked a lot about finding your venue for either your event or your wedding. And today I am back to share some more with you, kind of part two to this segment. I'm here to share with you some more things that you want to take into play and consideration in selecting your venues. The first thing I referenced was to have a notebook, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about and what I mean about having that notebook. When you visit these venues and you're selecting, you want to take notes down because it can be overwhelming when you visit. Some venues it might be a quick tour. Some other venues it could be an hour and a half to 2 hours. I know at my venue that I own and operate with my sister, a good tour is going to run obviously an hour and a half to possibly 2 hours, and that can provide a lot of information, and it can be overwhelming. And when you leave, you might not necessarily remember everything. I do give a packet and a pamphlet that shows pictures and visuals and everything that we offer so they can take that home with them, but sometimes places might not offer that. So you want to take your notes down so you can refer back to that when you're going through your selection. Probably a tour selection, probably when you narrow it down, should be 3 to 5 places. 5 might be on the high end, but it gives you a good perspective of what everybody offers, the differences they have, and every place is going to have its pros and cons. So jot those down, and then when you're sitting down with your team that's going to create your event, or a bride and groom, or whoever's getting married, that way you can sit down and make your selection to what fits you best appropriately. Also in this folder that you're going to keep, you're going to book other vendors. So your florist, your DJ, your band, your videographer, your photographer, a photo booth, an ice cream truck. Any of these things that create your vision, you're going to get a contract most likely. You want to put those contracts in the folder. If you do have a coordinator or an on-site coordinator, you might want to share those with them. So when the day comes, they know exactly what that contract involves or what is needed. I touched on this in my first podcast, but a band, for instance, in their contract, they're going to have some needs, and that needs to be reviewed ahead of time so that the venue knows if they need something or they don't have something, they can make you aware of that. So you need to make an adjustment or adaptation to that so that you can be prepared. So don't just get the contract and sign off on it. Read it, okay, and know what you need to do, because there's going to be do's and don'ts in everybody's contracts. So keep that in a folder. Also stay up to date with those contracts. You're going to have final payments that are due at a certain date. I know mine's a 60-day final payment due. I know other vendors have a 25-day, 30-day. So it's all going to be different. So you got to keep up with all those contracts. So it's good to have them all in one place, printed out, or even in a folder on with your computer or something like that. But have everything that you can stay organized. And I know I said something about organization. If you're a person that's not organized, make sure that somebody else that is helping you and assisting you is organized, because it's a lot to put together, whether you're just having a smaller event or your wedding. So when you're searching your venue, also just what I talked about, your other vendors, you need to see within that contract what a refund policy is. When I speak about venues, there's lots of things that can occur. There could be a tragedy, which we most certainly don't want to talk about that, but it is life and things can happen. Do they have a plan for weather? And I'm not talking about like we have a thunderstorm roll in, and when I talked about what's option B on your wedding day for what you're going to do for weather, I'm talking about, if you live in an area where there's a major hurricane coming in, or a major snowstorm, we have a blizzard, you might not be able to have your wedding on that day. So how does your venue adapt to that? What are they going to do? What's the plan for that? Also, I've come into situations with people that book with me that one of the individuals is in the military and they end up getting deployed. How does the venue handle that? Do they just say, sorry, you lose your money and there's no refund policy and whatever? Or do they say, hey, we understand. We're going to move it to the next available date for you guys and us whenever that person returns home from their deployment. So, this might not refer to all of you, but these are things that actually happen in a real life, and you got to think about those things. So if you're one of those people, when you're visiting, you need to ask these questions, and if they don't really have an answer for you planned, that could be a little bit of a red flag. So just something to touch base on, because again, these things do happen. Within that contract, or you're sitting down with a venue, are there any do's and don'ts? I'm sure they're going to have a don'ts policy. You can't do this, you can't do that. And that is also going to turn over to your vendors. So they're going to have some don'ts that your vendors can't do. What maybe can your florist not do? What were your videographer and photographer? There might be places on the property that they're going to say, hey, you can't take this bride and groom over here to take pictures because of this area. It has this certain, I don't know, whatever, they can't go. Or it's not their property and you think it is, and it would be trespassing. So little things like that. Every one of your vendors is going to have probably a don't from the venue. So you need to be the one to share that, because your vendors might not necessarily meet with a venue owner, or they might show up day of, which leads into another thing. Does your venue meet with your vendors ahead of time if they've never been to that venue? Does somebody meet with them, or is it sight unseen when they come to create your special day? They arrive and it's like, where's this? Who's meeting with them when they arrive? Is it you? Or your maid of honor? Your mom? Your dad? You really don't want to run into that situation, because believe me, it's a process. It's a day of lots of things, and you want to create that amazing experience. And really, your mom or dad or your maid of honor really don't have time to step away and meet your caterer or the florist to step away and do these things. So somebody should be there, and either, we talked about it before, they're either going to have an on-site coordinator that works with you that your venue provides, or as I recommended, you're going to want to hire a coordinator. They should be the person to meet them there that day. A highly recommended thing would be, if they've never been to that venue, to have them meet you there maybe ahead of time. So all these little T's can be crossed and these I's can be dotted, and it's not sight unseen. So meet with them a couple months out. I know if I've never had a vendor to my venue before, I ask them to meet with me, the bride and groom or whoever's having the event. They don't need to be there. I just meet with them so they know what my expectation is, how we flow with the day of, and where things are. So when they come, they don't have extra stress or anxiety coming in, because believe it or not, your vendors are going to get like that. They're trying to create the best absolute experience possible. You're paying them, and that's their job. And they have all these things to do in their profession that they're going to be thinking of ahead of time on the way to your site. And believe me, it can create some stressors for them. They're not going to let you know that. But if you meet with them or somebody meets with them ahead of time, it most certainly is going to be so helpful and make your day run so much smoother. With your setups, I talked about before, does the venue provide chairs, tables? You know, we made that list of what they provide. But sometimes, I know I had an experience one time helping a dear friend of mine, and they were at they picked a beautiful place and they had this venue, but they had to set up their own chairs. And the location they picked for their ceremony and where they wanted to have this beautiful day of, it was quite a hike from where the venue had the chairs stored. So I had volunteered to set up the chairs, and I don't really know how I was going to get all these chairs to where they're going to have this ceremony. And good thing that I had access to a truck, because I had to load all the chairs, stack them in a truck, and then unload all the chairs to set them up in the ceremony location. And then, of course, for their cleanup, they had to have a truck later that evening or the next day to put them back where the venue had them stored. So that process took me several hours, okay? So, we talked about how much time do you have beforehand to set up? How much time does your venue allow you? And what's the cleanup time, and what are you responsible for? And all that wasn't really an ideal experience, because thank goodness I had a truck and that we had a little bit of time to do it, because it definitely was a process. So something you need to take in consideration, putting 150 or however many people you're having come to your wedding, your event, and setting up chairs, it wouldn't have been easy to do that with a car. So something to take into consideration. Another thing is, depending on where you're having this experience, I talked about if you want to have something out in the field, you want a tent and you're having your reception out there, you might have to rent a dance floor too. So you want to jot down all these things that you might have to rent, and then you want to find a rental company, most likely, that has all of these things, your chairs, your tables, your dance floor. Maybe you have to rent a bar setup. When I have the bartender vendor here, we're going to talk a lot about those things. But, it would be ideal to find a rental company that has it all, so that you're not having a contract from this rental company and that rental company and this rental company, because that's going to create a little bit more chaos, a lot more phone calls, emails, and translation. And that goes back to, you got to be organized. The more you have, the more vendors you have, the more it's going to create. So just something else to take consideration, because like I said, every venue has its pros and cons. Another thing, when you're preparing for your big day, it is going to require a rehearsal. We all like to think that a wedding seems easy, but it really isn't. And I highly recommend having a rehearsal practice. So, a lot of people, believe it or not, I work with a lot of people, up to date. As of today, I've done 176 weddings. And it amazes me how many people have never been to a wedding or never been in a wedding. And so it's very important to do a rehearsal practice because it gives people that are in the wedding a peace of mind of where they're supposed to stand, how it's supposed to flow, what they're supposed to do. And that's why it's important to have a coordinator, because that coordinator will help the pastor or the officiant actually do the rehearsal practice and work with your whole family, your whole team of people that are a part of your special day. So a day of what that's supposed to look like and what you don't do and how we do things to actually work for a videographer or photographer. And I know when I have that vendor in here, they're going to talk about that, because there's certain things that it's like, man, that would have been an awesome picture, but they didn't help us out on that. So, you gotta practice. And believe me, some people forget, but when I work with them and tell them to actually, okay, it's your turn to walk down the aisle, they kind of know what that's supposed to look like and where they're supposed to stand. So I highly recommend that. And it's also a peace of mind for your officiant or pastor to kind of do a run through. Sometimes people ask their friend to get ordained and they've never done this before. So it certainly is nice to do a trial because, again, they get anxiety. You have a ton of people staring at you, and some people don't like to speak in front of people. So you might want to also ask someone, that might be comfortable with it, because, I get a lot of people and they're like, Lettie, I've never done this before, and I'm very nervous and I'm not really good in front of people. So sometimes I have to coach people through the whole experience. And on that rehearsal practice, it certainly makes it easier. You can tell their nerves calm, and day of, I coach them up. You can do this. Remember, we're doing this and this and this. Remember, you don't start speaking until the mom of the bride sits down. Remind people after the bride walks down the aisle to please be seated so they're not standing there in their whole ceremony. I've experienced that. Just simply forgot because of nerves. So rehearsal practice, highly consider. And, I tell people, always give your videographer or your photographer maybe an opportunity if they want to come for rehearsal practice. They might have that in their contract, they might not, because it gives them some ideas, and they can even shoot your details ahead of time, so it speeds up your day. Something we'll talk about later, obviously, with our vendors, because believe me, there's so much to talk about. One thing is that whenever you do select your venue, you never know, it might not be the county you live in. You have to get your marriage license, whatever county you get married in. So every state has different rulings, different procedures with their marriage license, but you actually are going to go to the courthouse, to the county where your venue is located, to get your marriage license. Don't wait till 2 days before you get married. Do this a month out or a couple weeks out so that you're prepared. A lot of people, it's one of the things that we're all in excitement for picking our venue, our photographers, our florists, all these things we're doing. And we're so excited about creating this vision and getting prepared for our special day. And it's like, oh crap, we forgot to get our marriage license. So jot that down in that notebook, put it on your calendar of this is about the time we need to, but again, in the county where your venue is located. Talking about, I talked about, is there somebody on site to meet your vendors? One thing is, what do they provide? Are they providing an arch piece? If you're in an open location, do they provide that? Is it set up? Does the florist have to set that up? What does that look like? Do they provide a ladder for the florist? A lot of these arches, or if they're creating an installation in your reception area, do they provide the ladders for the florist? Or do you have to provide the ladders, and actually how tall it is? These things need to be done ahead of time. I know, a lot of times the florist is stuck doing their own thing, and they have to become prepared, and they have to set up the arch. They have to do the draping and whatever the location they're using. It might be a structure that's already set on site that you don't have to put together or tear down, and it could be 12 feet high. They're going to need a ladder that prepares themselves for that, and all those things need to be determined ahead of time so they can come prepared. Photographers sometimes like to use a ladder so they can create a beautiful visual, whatever they're trying to capture, your details, anything. So if they're that type of person, they might bring their own ladder, or you could say, hey, we have this, and the person that's your coordinator, whatever, needs to let them know ahead of time so that they can have utilization of all that. I touched base on this the last one about, I think it was the end of my podcast. I talked about whoever you select, whatever you decide to do, make sure you follow up with them. Like I said, I give a lot of tours and I end up following up with a lot of people. Hey, are you still interested, or where do you stand, kind of with booking and that type of thing. And I do my due diligence about that when I work with my clients. And that puts an extra work on your vendor. And it's not just your venue. You've got photographers, all these people I've talked about, all these people I'm going to invite in. And they're going to, like I said, it's their professional area. They're going to share a lot of stuff with you, with their experiences, do's and don'ts, recommendations. So they meet with a lot of people just like I do in my profession. But you need to follow up with them. Don't just ghost somebody. They take a lot of time. Like I told you, it takes me an hour and a half to 2 hours. That's just my weddings. But I meet with a lot of people just having a birthday party or a bridal shower. That takes time. And when you put time into it and you're trying to create that experience that you would want to have, or you want everybody else to have, that's a person that you've connected with. And so that's how they review it. So follow up with them, and believe me, it's not going to hurt their feelings if you call and say, hey, I thank you for your time. It was amazing, but we've decided to go elsewhere. It's common courtesy to do it. And yeah, you might have a lot of people you have to follow up with, but it's respectful. It's the right thing to do. And it makes their life a lot easier because then they know that they have that date available or they can move forward. So just do the common courtesy. And also, you never know. You might come back to that person later with whatever you're planning with in your life. You might have to come back to that person, and you want to make sure that you create an experience with them that they would be willing to work with you again. Sometimes if you create an experience, you don't follow up or you ghost somebody, they're going to write you off. And you need to remember later down the road that you might need that person, or you're going to come into play with them again with something or somehow, some way. So just follow up with everybody. Like I said, common courtesy, the respectful thing to do. So that's kind of part 2, just some things that, we wanted to follow up on with venues and things moving forward. Obviously, I'm going to be back to visit. I'm going to have some awesome people in that are great at the work that they do. They've done it over time. They're going to be able to share these experiences with you. And we'll learn some things too. And we always learn every day in the world that we do in events and coordinating. And then I'm going to be back on with a segment on coordination because like I talked to you all in the first podcast that I did, there's such thing as a great coordinator and a not so good coordinator, and kind of what does that look like and really what are they supposed to do? I think a lot of people go into it and they really don't know really what a good coordinator is and really what their responsibilities are for you. So I'll be back. And you probably get tired of seeing me, but this is just a thing. Like I told you, I created a blog last year and a lot of people reached out to me and said, wow. And then with my experiences, I really have found that a lot of people, really don't know what to do. They try really hard, but they just don't know. They don't have the experiences. They don't know where to start. And sometimes they're just completely clueless. So I'll be back. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you to River Spirit Media for allowing me to do this. And they're just awesome people. If you ever need something for like this, hit them up. Stay tuned and we'll be back soon. Have a wonderful day.